let's introduce the story of the Dark Room. So what's it about?
Well, it's really about a relationship that develops between a very elderly, quite kind of middle class white woman who is sort of coming towards the end of her life and who ends up being, well, in a ongoing conversation with a young woman who's of Jamaican origin, and they start to talk about this old lady's experience of a summer that she spent as a sort of late teenager, and it really becomes a story about stories and who gets to tell them and what happens when they get forgotten, and this old lady attempting to try to, into some extent, to try to validate her own story, um, and and I suppose it's also very much about memory and about truth. And so it kind of felt like uh, an interesting place to experiment with form as well, because although in many ways The Dark Room is a much more conventional film stylistically than either of the two that I've made before, um, and borrows much more from a kind of cinematic tradition. I think there's the one area that it's still quite experimental with is flashbacks and memory, because as we all know as human beings, we don't flash back to perfect photographic memories of our past. Our memories live alongside us and change with us. And so I kind of wanted to play with a language that could begin to experiment a little bit with that in a visual way as well as in a narrative way.
That's incredible. And so the Dark Room is both simultaneously a feature film that is in development still.
It's in development. We're hoping and we're planning to shoot
Mhm.
it in Portugal in this autumn, or late autumn, so October, November.
Brilliant. So alongside that, and actually we should talk about how they interact in terms of your thinking as well. So alongside the theatrical, flat screen experience is this 3D uh, abstracted world, which is we've variously called a theatrical trailer, an immersive trailer. Talk us through that then. So, because the project focused on this 3D world and the visual potential of this world. So, talk us through kind of, I guess, why you wanted to explore it in a 3D environment as well as in a 2D. Where did you think that would take you on a journey?
It's always interesting, I think, or I find it interesting to engage with new visual storytelling opportunities. And VR is clearly absolutely sort of pregnant with potential. And I remember, there are very few moments, I think, in a sort of technological life, if you like, which feel truly transformative. Most of them feel just iterative. It's like, the next iPhone is rather better than the last one. And there are a few moments when you really do feel that things have fundamentally shifted. And for me, one of those moments was putting on a VR headset and thinking, "Oh my god!" And I kind of suppose I just wanted to explore that in terms of what might be possible with a short form narrative in VR. I think one of the things that felt like nobody had, or at least in my experience, nobody had really done much with was composited VR, which by which I mean a kind of mixture of live action and sort of virtual worlds. There's an awful lot of computer animated VR, and there's quite a lot of cinematic VR, but there doesn't seem to be much that blends those two together. So I was interested in that, and I think there's something as well that feels so inner about VR that it kind of, I mean, quite literally, you block out your senses in order to look inside, or at least to be offered another way of looking inside. And so I think it sort of felt like it was a interesting technology for this project. There was some synchronicity there between the idea of memory and unreliability and this sense of being kind of captive inside your own or an invented space. One of the things we were trying and have been trying to develop is a way of moving from one time frame to another without just cutting, because obviously the conventional film language, albeit occasionally back in the 60s and 70s with that wonderful kind of wavy wavy screen. But when you go backwards in time, there is essentially it's just a harsh cut, and there you are, you're somewhere else. And I think I was really interested in this sort of limbo between the very present and the very past, and the way that those two things collided. And actually, in the VR experiments, there was something very interesting I found about the kind of natural panning that you do with your head when you're searching. Essentially, there are a series of small vignettes, which are memories, which exist around a central room, and the central room is kind of the grounding present. And then beyond that, these kind of vignettes come and go in a sort of rather abstracted space beyond the room. In trying to move your attention from one of these vignettes to another, I became very interested in how and what one saw, and how the kind of, for example, the some of the objects within the room that grounded the present mixed with the past in a way that felt to me very actually analogous to the way that memory genuinely works. And it's just that interesting thing, isn't it, that memory is this kind of constant revisionist sort of creation.